you're watching Business World Live. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Delos Santos. Here are today's top stories. After 2 years of distance learning, schools all over the country open the new academic year with the return of face-to-face classes.
The budget season kicks off today. Lawmakers have about 6 weeks to pass the spending plan before recess.
The government issues draft rules on digital payments. Agencies are given 6 months to less than 3 years to shift to digital disbursements and collections.
And the Trade Department vows to keep a close eye on sugar prices. Let's begin our broadcast with Congress kicking off the budget season. This as the House of Representatives will receive the 5.26 trillion proposed 2023 national at SGA. This means lawmakers have under 6 weeks to pass an appropriations bill before they go on recess. The proposed budget for next year is nearly 5% larger than the 5.02 trillion peso 2022 edition. Marikina Representative Stella Kimbo said the Committee on Appropriations is committed with approval of the economic recovery budget. Now, while Deputy Minority Leader Bernadette Herrera said the minority will thoroughly review the proposed national budget.
Now, Filipino students are going back to their classrooms today and school year 2022 to 2023 officially begins. After over 2 years since the pandemic, thousands of schools are now re-implementing the face-to-face learning setup, but learning institutions are still allowed to implement hybrid learning, at least for now. As of August 20, the Education Department says there are around 27.6 million enrolled learners for this school year. That's 96% of the agency's 28.6 million target. Full face-to-face classes will begin in November. Now, to give us the latest on the first day of classes for school year 2022 to 2023, we have with us on the show Marian Enriquez. She's reporting live from the town of Hermosa in Bataan. Maan, how's the situation on the ground?
Yes, Jess, we're here at the Hermosa Elementary School in Bataan. Full face-to-face classes that will be implemented for 5 days. Teachers here have also started assessing their pupils to identify their capacity on reading English, Filipino comprehension, and solving math problems. The assessment also aims to identify the level or degree of learning loss among the students over the past 2 years of blended learning. Teachers aim to form strategies on how they will be able to address these issues. Grade 2 teacher Bev says that most of her students still cannot read simple 3-letter words since the foundation of reading begins in grade 1. She admits that they're now having difficulty addressing the matter. Just some of the techniques that will be implemented to help students catch up on unfinished learning are peer tutoring or teaching, remedial classes, and the DEAR program or drop everything and read. The full assessment will be conducted during the first week of their classes. Jess.
All right, thank you very much for those updates. Again, Marian Enriquez reporting live from Bataan. Now, after more than 2 years of online learning, students finally trooped back to schools for the resumption of face-to-face classes. What might this mean for the country's recovery prospects? Joining us for insights is Filomeno Sta, III, BusinessWorld columnist and co-founder of Action for Economic Reforms. Filomeno, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Okay, while we are...
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us again. It has been said time and again, more than 2-year hiatus from physical classes will worsen the economic scarring from the pandemic. How optimistic are you now that some schools have finally returned to face-to-face classes? By how much do you think will this aid recovery?
Of course, the resumption of face-to-face classes is most welcome. For one thing, even though the pandemic is still there, we now have the ability to address it, contain it, thanks to vaccination and other efforts. Of course, it's also clear that face-to-face is superior to other ways of
Mhm.
doing classes. The National Economic and Development Authority has done some estimates on the losses arising from school closure. I recall that recently, the NEDA estimated that the resumption of face-to-face can result in additional economic activities translating to about 12 billion pesos every week. That's quite significant.
Mhm. Sir, but other schools have not gone full force yet. Marami pa rin public schools that are doing trial hybrid and saying that of course in November, that is the order by the DepEd. It's still a few months from now. How much pain to the economy is every delay of a month wherein there's no full-blown face-to-face classes, and at the same time, are we actually ready for this when it comes to have we had already put in the resources in our healthcare system to ensure that the children as well as the teachers and staff are now safe?
Yes, that's a good insight, Dani, in the sense that it's also important for the schools to be prepared for full face-to-face classes. We just do not want children to be going to school but facing big risks. And so for some schools, I do understand that the transition is needed. It's not easy after 2 years of closure to move to full face-to-face classes. So for some, there's going to be a transition, and that is understandable.
Mhm. Sir, a very important point is a lot of people are going to be able to go back to work. Once schools start opening, there are, maraming tao, especially women, that have had to let go of their jobs to take care of the children in the household. How much of an impact is this going to be on the underemployment in the country?
You're right there. As I said, the resumption of face-to-face classes will boost the economy. It will increase economic activity, and I think the estimate done by NEDA takes into account the parents being more productive as their children return to school. The time of parents are freed up, so they can allot more time for work and other productive activities. So that's included in the study done by NEDA.
Now, earlier, we did see, of course, Maan's report in Bataan. The school, of course, is implementing remedial classes here. Now, in fact, you have the good NEDA Secretary, Arsenio Balisacan, in July saying that, there's a need to implement internships and makeup classes to avoid irreversible human capital losses. How heavy of a need is it to extend learning time to make up for lost time? And will this even be effective here in the Philippines?
First of all, we do recognize that the problems in Philippine education have been there even before the pandemic broke out. We have been bad performers in math, in literacy, and the like. And of course, the pandemic aggravated the situation. 2 years of lost learning, very difficult, and hence remedial classes are necessary. How long that will take, I don't know, but we have a longer term problem. It cannot be fixed in a year or so. As I said, the problem dates back as far back as 10 years ago or even farther. And much has to be done regarding the quality of education. The Department of Education must now give attention to quality. Before, the focus has been on building schools, on increasing human resources. They are all important, but even if we do increase human resources, even if we do increase the salaries of teachers, even if we build new schools, but if the curriculum and the quality of teaching are inferior, then the problem remains.
Much of that, of course, hinges as well on the budget that will be set for education. Speaking of which, budget season, yet again, some lawmakers now touting the 2023 spending plan as the economic recovery budget. What do you think should be the priority here?
Regarding the budget, education has always received the highest allocation. The question is the allocation within the Department of Education, where to spend the money. And as I said, emphasis has to be given to quality. This doesn't necessarily mean huge additional resources. It's more of a question of finding out the appropriate interventions to upgrade the skills of the teachers. And related to that, reviewing the curriculum to make it more responsive to the times. But in relation to the budget, the best way to look at it is to first identify what the main problems are in relation to the economy. And if we do a basic review, we will conclude that problems include inflation, very high, high inflation, unexpectedly high inflation, the poor performance of agriculture, which aggravates the food shortage, and the problem of a narrowing fiscal space. And that brings us back to the question of the budget. Surely there is pressure to increase the budget not only for education, but for agriculture, for social protection since the pandemic is still there, and for the subsidies in light of high prices. But how can that be done in a situation where our deficit is pretty high and our debt is increasing? It's not a problem. The debt at present is still manageable, but we just cannot risk debt forever increasing, and so that fiscal consolidation program anchored on new revenues is necessary.
Sir, how much more hikes can our economy absorb, rate hikes from the Bangko Sentral? Because the governor has already mentioned things that you have said that, there needs to be non-policy related interventions already to arrest inflation. We cannot keep relying on this. We've had downgrades in terms of our growth expectations for this year. We're now above the pre-pandemic interest rate level. At what point can we say, enough is enough, especially since we need to recover, but at the same time, ang taas din po ng bilihin and we need to anchor inflation expectations. Until what can the economy take?
The BSP and Governor Philip Medalla have sent a signal, which you have paraphrased, that we have reached that point that other interventions are not necessary, not coming from the PSP. I think his main point is this: let's see what is the source of high prices. Interest rates are most appropriate to address problems relating to demand and problems relating to people's expectations of inflation in the future. But in the Philippine context, the real problem has something to do with supply, and the interest rates will not address the supply problem. The supply of food, the supply of, including sugar, the supply of fuel. These problems arose from external shocks, and it's not the BSP's role to address these problems. BSP intervention to address supply problems will be inappropriate. What has to be done on food? Of course, there are short-term and long-term measures. Short-term, since there's a shortage, it's obvious that we have to source these products abroad. We have to import. We have to liberalize.
Okay, so back to
Fuel,
basics.
of course, we don't have fuel, and the best way there is to have targeted subsidies. We cannot subsidize everyone. That will result in a huge drain in resources, aggravating our fiscal problem. So targeted subsidies are needed. Nonetheless, even targeted subsidies would entail new resources. And we return again to that question of having a fiscal consolidation program anchored on new taxes. We cannot avoid new taxes. I think that is the indirect message too of the BSP.
All right.
Okay, sir. So as you mentioned po, a lot of basic issues to be targeted here. Education on the one hand, as was mentioned earlier, but as well subsidies in terms of the inflationary effect, and particularly on the agricultural sector, and of course, plugging in that deficit, the fiscal deficit. Maraming salamat po. That was of course Filomeno Sta III, BusinessWorld columnist and co-founder and coordinator over at the Action for Economic Reform. Salamat, sir.
Thank you and take care.
Well, let's pause for a quick break, but coming right up after that. Industry players expect the new Sugar Regulatory Administration Board to work closely with stakeholders. More of that and other stories when Business World Live returns. Stay with us. And you're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel.
Now, more than 48,000 indigent students received cash assistance from the DSWD on Saturday. That's equivalent to over 141 million pesos in educational cash assistance distributed to learners. Ilocos and Western Visayas regions recorded the highest payouts, where over 20 million pesos worth of cash aid was distributed to more than 5,000 students in each region. The payout will run for 6 Saturdays until September 24. But the first day of distribution of educational assistance was marred by chaos as large crowds swarmed field offices. Faith Del Mundo with the details.
Large crowd flocked to the DSWD Central Office on the first day of the distribution of educational assistance on Saturday. Veronica Ruben was already in line as early as Friday afternoon.
Laking tulong nito sa mga anak ko. Yung pera kasi kagaya ng ako, na-stroke ako. Na may stroke po ako kaya walang trabaho ngayong asawa ko. Bibili ng mga school supply. Yung anak ko kasi wala pang gamit.
On Saturday afternoon, the DSWD NCR decided to temporarily suspend the distribution of educational assistance. The office said health and safety protocols were not followed. Social Welfare Secretary Erwin Tulfo apologized to those who were not able to get their ayuda.
I am sorry, all right? I apologize po kung kayo po ay hindi nabigyan ng cash ayuda, pero wala po akong sinabi na lahat kayo bibigyan ko ng cash ayuda today. I said, i-accommodate ko po kayo.
The DSWD is giving out a total of 500 million pesos in financial assistance to indigent students. Up to 3 beneficiaries per family can receive cash aid worth between 1,000 and 4,000 pesos. Tulfo said he simplified the requirements to ease the burdens of recipients, but he personally appealed to the public for their understanding as large number of applications are being processed.
Yun pang hindi namin na-anticipate na yung mga tiga-ibang lungsod, ibang bayan, ibang probinsya, pupunta po rito. Ang sagot to sa amin, hindi namin alam na doon pala. But alam naman nila sa website namin, sir, na mayroon po kami mga DSWD sa mga probinsya, Sir Rambo. So, di ko na ho maintindihan kung paano pa ho explain sa kanila. Kaya marami rin. Yan ho ang reason why marami po. Because they're coming from the different cities.
To ensure that chaos will not happen again, the DSWD decided to seek the assistance of local government units. The agency advised those who want to avail of the assistance to first secure an appointment online via QR code. For News 5, Faith Del Mundo, we are One News.
Now, industry players expect the new officials of the Sugar Regulatory Administration to improve coordination with stakeholders. United Sugar Producers Federation President Manolet Lamata said SRA's regulations should undergo consultation to come up with a, quote, collective and cohesive win-win solution that is fair for all stakeholders and consumers, end of quote. Lamata also noted that sugar importation should be the last remedy to address a supply shortage. Over the weekend, President Marcos named 3 new officials of the SRA, including David John Tadeus Alba as acting administrator.
Now, this from the Philippine Star. The Trade Department will start regularly monitoring the sugar prices. Trade Undersecretary Carol Sanchez said sugar will be included in the list of basic and prime commodities. Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles earlier said that the DTI would monitor the 70 peso per kilo price of sugar as agreed by SM Supermarket, Robinson Supermarket, and Pure Gold. Cruz Angeles said Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez appealed to the business owners to lower the price of sugar to help the ordinary consumers until supply stabilizes.
Now, the Philippines and Thailand have agreed to update their tourism promotion agreement to support both countries' economic recoveries. Tourism Secretary Cristina Frasco and her Thai counterpart agreed to update their tourism deal on the sidelines of the 11th ASEAN Tourism Ministerial Meeting in Bangkok. Frasco floated possible collaborations with Thailand in meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions tourism, education tourism, particularly English as a second language, and food and gastronomy tourism.
Now, the Finance Department and other agencies come up with the draft rules on digital payments. The draft IRR of Executive Order number 170 mandates all government agencies to transition to digital disbursement and collection within 6 months to less than 3 years of the effectivity date of the rules. Stakeholders are given until August 24th to give their feedback on the draft.
All right, and those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. But don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local boards when BusinessWorld Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Business World Live. Now, Dan, the president himself has had to go directly to retailers to plead on behalf of consumers to actually put a price cap on sugar. While we're at it, let's check in on those stocks.
Exactly, Jess. So those are, of course, three of our biggest retailers here. I'm going to share the screen of my Bloomberg terminal, and you've seen them. At least SM Prime, of course, that is one of our biggest, retailers here, down a touch by 8 centavos. But you can see that in the past 3 days, they've all been down. Despite the fact, of course, that the bourse has been swinging between gains and losses. And this, of course, on the back of even Marcos himself, Marcos Jr., saying that they will be sacrificing and helping consumers, even if this will be decreasing their profit. So the retail price of sugar from 90 to 100 is down to 70 pesos per kilo, Jess.
Now, Dan, last week we did see the worst week in global equity since June, even as we outperformed the region. What's the outlook like for the last trading week of August?
Exactly that. While the rest of the global markets did pretty badly last week, we did very well. And if you can take a look, maybe that a rally might be right for some profit taking. You can see on my terminal here that we're back down to 6,700 levels. That's a slide already at the open. We're just 30 minutes into trade, down by 1 2/10% here. And this is consistent with the outlook that our analysts have been telling us. China Bank Securities' Racine Mercado is saying that the market will be expected to move sideways. Phil Stock says, the rally came from robust second quarter earnings, but that might be, again, ripe for some profit taking. And of course, just a lot of other econ data as well. Let's take a look at the BOP, or the balance of payments here. We actually had the July deficit, the widest in 17 months. So our balance of payments is at a deficit of $1.819 billion. That's a reversal from last year's surplus of $642 million. Another thing that a lot are watching out for is the Fed. They will be meeting at Jackson Hole this week. Traders are betting on how hawkish they will continue to be. And of course, the peso is being watched very closely. This, as we were actually, already likely seeing quite some weaknesses, even as the central bank did an increase. We dropped for a 6-day on Friday, even after the BSP raised by 50 basis points. Traders are saying that, there's going to be even a bigger differential with the hawkishness of the Fed and, of course, the statements of Governor Medalla, saying that they might have already, there might just be a couple more of 25 basis points, so not as hawkish as the Fed. Now, another thing to be watching out for, will we be retesting the levels here, which were, of course, the weakest we've ever seen. Just 56.45 per dollar has been the record low of the peso, and traders are watching out for that 57 level, Jess.
Okay, let's see if that, of course, happens. But at least for today, that's it for us, August 22, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com.ph and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
I'm Danie, Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News, all sides, all the time.